to be smarter, to farm smarter in the future, keep the farm sustainable for other generations down the road. And we simply just need to make more money. And so my area that did go over $200 an acre net profit, over and above our control, I might add. It was a strip till irrigated corn soybean rotation. I am a fairly large advocate of strip till. I don't know how many guys are strip tilling that's on the call today, but when I was a kid, my father and my grandfather taught me how to do conventional tillage. The operation at the time was disc rip in the fall, come in the spring with a field cultivator years ago. Now it's kind of a soil finisher, but that was the tillage program. And I think there's still a lot of people that use that today. And I think it can work. We've grown some pretty nice corn in some of those situations, but sometimes I'd run into some issues. One, depending on when we got the disc ripper in the fall, how well of a job it did. Later, if we had a late harvest and we had wet soils, that disc ripper wasn't doing anything for me. It's just smearing. I'm not getting any lift and fracture at all. And then I come in the spring, and if I go in a little bit too wet, some farmers will call it, hey, it was a little heavy. They won't say it's wet. They say it's heavy. But you get a cultivator, shovel coming in 3, 4, 5 inches deep, and we're creating soil density layers. Those are layers of compaction that a root system is going to struggle to get through. And I thought, yes, sometimes conventional tillage works, but other times, boy, this thing is a challenge. And I just think I'm ruining some of these soils as a result of some of the compaction and smear lines that I'm putting in with this conventional tillage. So I jumped to no-till. I talk about going one extreme to the other. I go to no-till, and I failed completely at it because I had too much tillage on my brain, because that's what our family farm had taught me. And so I thought, oh gosh, how do I get a happy medium here? And we started evaluating strip till, and I thought, wow, this works really nice. We can address some nutrition in bands with a strip. Yes, I have conventional tillage right where the strip is at. It's still getting me some of my lift and fracture with a mole knife going 8 to 10 inches deep, but I'm leaving all that residue, and I'm not doing tillage in between my bands. And this has been pretty successful. Now, I had to change some things around in my operation, but when this thing works, it's been incredible for us. And this was our number one ROI on the farm this past year. You can see the strips that we're planting in, just beautiful strips. And in this spring, those beautiful conditions led to great stands of corn, which then led to high ear counts that really set the stage up for high yield. Now, here's some strip till. Before, I got a little video here I'm going to show you, but look at all the residue. When I was a kid, if we were going to come back into corn, grow corn again as a second crop, the guys would say, oh, you got to bury that residue. You got to put it into the soil profile. And that's where that conventional tillage came in. And boy, I can't tell you how wrong that was thinking about it. Now I got a Case IH corn head that I'm running here, and it's just straight stalk rollers. There's no chopping ability. I am running stompers on it, believe it or not. You can't even really tell in this picture. But look at the residue. I'll get the video going here. I'll shut that sound off. But you can see all that residue in there, and we're coming in with we're going 8 to 10 inches deep on a strip. And those are just beautiful conditions to come back in the spring to plant with. And I'm not dealing with all the residue, and I'm still coming in and putting my nutrition in. You see my Montag equipment card up here. In this particular picture, we're putting DAP and potash in the bottom of these strips. And this is where the first nutritional banding happens out in the field. Right after harvest, we're coming in, placing dry fertilizer in these strips. Now, we've got a reallocation program that we utilize at the PTI farm. I know I'm going to come in with a planter, and I'm going to put additional nutrition on. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But because I have split applications, dry fertilizer in the fall, liquid on the planter, I need to reallocate my units of dry fertilizer. In other words, I can't put all my dry fertilizer on in the fall in these strips, because I know I'm coming back with additional nutrients on the planter. So I have to reduce the amount of dry that I'm putting on in the fall to account for those split applications. And that's something that I don't think a lot of farmers take into consideration. I get a lot of calls this time of the year where growers say, hey, I'm going to put liquid on the planter. I got FurrowJet or Conceal. I want to put something on. What can I run through the planter? And I said, well, wait a minute. What did you do for dry fertilizer last fall? And they said, well, we soil tested. We put all the dry on. And I said, well, I don't think you should put any starter on. You've already spent your dollars. You've already put all your nutrients on. You're just going to be over applying and overspending at this point. So that's why we reallocate, and this is where it all starts, right here on the strip till bar. We're using a Kuhn-Krause Gladiator for guys who are wondering what rig we're using out here in the field. This rig allows me to do broadcast versus banded applications, and for a research rig, this is just awesome. On my home farm, we farm about 25 miles away here from Pontiac. We're using either a 30-footer or a 40-footer of this same Kuhn-Krause Gladiator, and it's done a pretty nice job for us. And again, these are all fall applications, what we're talking about. We do have some spring strips that we've got here at the research farm. I'm not a big advocate of spring strip till, usually because we're just not fit. We're too wet underneath. And if you bring a mole knife in, like what we have on this Kuhn-Krause, you bring a mole knife in when we're wet, you can kind of cut away the strip, and you can look down at the bottom of the strip, and you can put your fist right in the air pocket down there. You don't get the fracture when we're wet. We get a smear line, and you just leave an air pocket down at the bottom. And some would say in the fall, well, maybe that's not a huge problem because you'll get the freeze and thaw. You'll get enough moisture to collapse it. I still think it's an issue, but in the spring, I don't know that we can rely on that year in and year out. It's all about timing, how early you can get in and get it done. But general rule of thumb, if I've got to go to strip till in the spring, I want to get away from a mole knife and I want to go to the vertical tillage type strip. And then I think we're going to be a little bit more successful with that. Here's what it looks like when we're planting into our strip till. It doesn't matter if it's beans or corn, we're planting into these strips. And I got to tell you guys, it's just beautiful conditions, what we planted into this spring. And this makes it awful easy. There's my conventional tillage just in the strip, right? And this is just easy to plant into. You can see we're running furrow force. You can see that imprint right there in the row, and just gorgeous conditions. Here's kind of a side shot. Look at that. I mean, just that is some good planting right there. And it's just easy for us to manage this thing. Now, I'm going to go back to this. Oops, let me go back one. Shut this sound off again. And I'm going to play this again. All right, this strip till bar that we're running. So in the past, to get strip till successful, we had some issues. And the issue was I wasn't pulling this fertilizer tank. I was pulling a bottle of ammonia. And that was a problem. And I learned that really quickly. So here's the deal, guys. We're out in the combine. We're harvesting corn. And I want to come in and make strips, harvesting beans for that matter too. I want to make strips, but it's September. It's too warm. I cannot put ammonia on because soils are too warm. And so my strip till bar is sitting in the yard. I've got potentially dry soils. I could make some beautiful strips, but I had to wait because of the ammonia. And we'd harvest a little more because soils were warm. We'd let it get cooler. We got later in the calendar, right? All of a sudden we get to late October. And all of a sudden, yes, the temperatures are coming down, but I catch a couple of rains, and now all of a sudden soils aren't fit. We're bringing the strip till bar out to make our strips and to put ammonia on, and it just didn't work. It flat out failed on us. We weren't making the right tillage strips, and we were smearing because of conditions. And so now I got a little smarter with this whole thing, and I said, why am I letting anhydrous ammonia slow me down? I'm not going to do this. We got rid of the anhydrous bottles, and we put the dry tanks on here. And as soon as we run the combine, we're out here making strips. I don't have to wait on temperature. I can do the right job with tillage when the soils are fit. I've got a larger window to get this thing done. And now all of a sudden, this thing started making sense. With the liquid nitrogen we're putting on the planter these days, I don't need the anhydrous ammonia. And for the strips, the most important thing was getting the tillage done right. And I'm still putting the dry fertilizer in the bottom of the strip. So nutritionally, this has been 100% win for me, getting rid of that ammonia on the strip till bar. I'm not saying it won't work for other producers, but to me, year in and year out, it just slowed me down, and I couldn't get the perfect strip like I wanted. Getting rid of the ammonia, I could go in when it was fit, and I could do a really nice job with it. All right, here's our yield, 368.2. 368 bushel corn is the highest yield I've ever recorded growing corn. And I do farm with my father. We're about 25 miles east of the PTI farm here in Pontiac, and not very good dirt. There's some farms that are good, but we don't have any irrigation and just a lot of variability on the farm. So it's been difficult to really raise high yield corn. Here at PTI, we're addressing some issues. Number one, irrigation. We do have irrigation here on the farm. We're doing things nutritionally that I think are working, and we were able to drive to 368.2. But again, this was strip till, it was irrigated, and it was a corn soybean rotation. We are using Netafim as our drip tape on the farm. I don't have an overhead pivot. And I'll show you what some of this looks like here. When we acquired the PTI farm, it was super wet, and you can kind of see the interstate going, looking in the background, cars going by. And that interstate's a problem for us because we couldn't put tile in because we really had no outlet. We couldn't bust through the interstate for our outlet. And then on the other side of the farm is the city of Pontiac. And how do I outlet water into the city? I can't do it through the storm sewer system. And so when we got on this farm, it was wet. It was wet in the spring. I had too much water. But then later on in the growing season, I never had a water supply to come in and irrigate with. So those were two issues that I wanted to take care of on this farm, eliminate some of the water stand in saturated soils, the lack of oxygen and throughout the soil profile. And so we found the lowest part of the farm, and this is what I call the prairie pothole. Whenever it rained, this is where water would stand. And I looked at this area of the farm and I said, this is my most expensive acre of the farm right here. I'm still buying seed to plant through this thing. I'm putting fertilizer on it. I'm putting herbicide on it, but yet when a combine goes through here, I'm not harvesting any crop. Most harvestable or most expensive acres I've got on the farm. Now we've redirected things, and this area is the most profitable area of my farm. Here's what we did. We came in and we made the prairie pothole just a little bit larger. We came in with some high hose excavators, and we dug this prairie pothole out to act as a reservoir for us. Now we've got an ability to have an outlet for water, and we're going to use that water in a couple different ways. We made this reservoir 2.5 acres in size. For those of you that are familiar with soil testing, this is a 2.5 acre grid, guys, 330 foot square. And I cut her out 25 foot deep in the middle. So now we've got a hole out here that's going to act as an outlet for water. This is what it looked like when we were done. We've got a farm pond out here. It's a reservoir where now we can hold water in this particular area, and then use it to get rid of water in the spring so we can make timely applications, make our soils healthier, more oxygen through the soil profile. But then later on during the growing season, when we turn off hot and dry, I'm going to recycle this water. Okay, here's kind of a shot of what it looks like looking from the north to the south. We've got the ability to put tile in now because we've got somewhere to outlet the water into this reservoir. So we brought our tile machines in. This was the first phase. We're putting 30-foot pattern tile in here, and all these tile laterals will feed into the reservoir and fill the pond up. So we've got water supply. When we were done with our first phase, we had 30-foot pattern tile, 60-foot pattern, and 120-foot pattern. This has kind of changed since then. We've split these 120s to be down to 30s, and we still have these 60s and 30s here, but we've added more tile in. This whole area has seen additional tile since we've started. But all of these laterals that we're putting in tie into a main that goes around this farm reservoir, and we fill this reservoir up with rain water. So it rains, it goes through the soil profile, hits the tile takes the water away and deposits it in the pond. Now, in the pond, the reservoir, we have at the main, we've got a sump pump. So when the main gets full of water, the sump pump kicks on and lifts the water up. This is called a lift station. We use a lift station for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm always flowing water. If you guys have an outlet on your farm, a tile outlet, say going into a creek, and the creek gets full of water and goes above your tile outlet, it's going to slow the tile down. I don't want to slow the tile down. If there's water in it, I want to get rid of it. And so this sump pump will keep the water running at all times. The other reason I have a lift station here is because this is how I fill it. I can fill this reservoir to full capacity with this pipe being on top and dropping the water in. And I can control the depth with gates of this reservoir. When we get full and I can't handle another gallon, I can open the gates and I can let water go out of it. We do have a tile that runs to the Vermilion River that's about 2 miles down the road from us, where the overflow does go to, which, by the way, the Vermilion River will go and deposit into the Illinois River. The Illinois River will then deposit water into the Mississippi River. And then from the Mississippi, we're going to the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. But I don't want to get rid of my water unless I'm completely full in this reservoir, because I'm going to turn around to use this water for irrigation. See, guys, there's nobody in Livingston County near Pontiac, Illinois, here where I'm at, that can irrigate because there's no water supply. We can't put a well in because we have no water underneath us. Now I've got the water sitting here. I've got all that rainwater that went through the tile, filled the reservoir up, and now I can recycle this rainwater. It's one of the neatest things. One of the things I've wanted to do for a long time is purely recycling water. Now we're using the Netafim drip to come in, and if we turn off hot and dry in the summer, I can add this water to the crop to feed it. I can also utilize fertigation. We tissue test, soil test, find out what we need to put to the crop, and we can do it through the drip. Now, I am drip tape on top of the soil surface. And I know everybody's saying, well, with drip tape, you're supposed to bury it. Yes, I know that. Normally guys would bury this 13 to 16 inches deep. I leave it on top because we are a demonstration farm. And when folks come to visit us in July, August, or September, when we talk about how we're feeding a crop with either water or nutrients, I want them to be able to see the drip tape. So we manually lay these drip lines. You see where I got a plug at the end of the run here. And then we turn the water on and it pressurizes this tape. This is pressure compensating tape. And so if you go uphill, you're going to get the same amount of water on the top of the hill as you will on the bottom of the hill. It's just super easy to use. We've got emitters every 24 inches on this tape. And simply when we turn the water on, it just drips water. It's like an IV, in a hospital. It's just dripping liquid. And we control the speed of the drip with the pressure that we're putting into the system. But one of these lines is going to feed both rows surrounding this drip tape. And then we're on 60-inch centers. Okay, I need the row next to it to come in with some of our high clearance rigs for fertilizer or for spraying passes, things like that. So I need the drive path. And so we go every other row on 60s, and it works out really nice. We've actually got 2 of these reservoirs on the farm. This was one that was already here at the farm. This white building you see is actually Walmart. This white building is actually Walmart, and they've got this retention pond. It takes all the water off of the parking lot. So here, now I don't need tile to fill the reservoir. When it rains, it hits the concrete and deposits into the pond. You can see the concrete structures there with the water. The runoff comes off the parking lot and just fills this pond up, and it fills up pretty quickly. But again, we're pumping out of this pond and putting water to our crop, and it's just an excellent situation for us reusing this rainwater. All right, so the 368, getting back to that high yield. Again, irrigation, I think, was a big part of it, putting water to the crop, taking that variability out of it. But I think nutrition placement was also key. We come in with the planter after we do our strip till, after we put that band of fertilizer on in the strips. Then we come in with the planter and we're looking at 3 additional ways of putting nutrition on. I start off in the furrow. We're using a product called FurrowJet to apply nutrition right in the center of the trench. This is next to the seed, okay, right up the gut, if you will. Now, the question here is, what are you going to put in the center of the furrow? Some folks want to put traditional starter fertilizers phosphorus, a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of potassium. I stay away from it. I don't want to screw anything up. Everything we do on the farm, I keep thinking of risk and reward. How much risk am I willing to take to get this high reward? And this is one that I get a little leery of, because we're paying some big bucks for the seed, and I don't want to harm the seed. So we're putting sugars and biologicals in the trench. I do think some growers could put some phosphorus in here. I tend to stay away from it though, and just use the sugar biologicals here. So I've got one tank and pump on the planter. It's a small system because these are relatively low rates here, but that's where we're addressing nutrition right off the bat, right next to the seed. Then I relay, and you'll hear me say that a couple times here today. We're going to relay to a different product or products in the wings of furrow jet. This is where we come out 3/4 of an inch away from where that seed's planted in the furrow and higher, and we can put a different product here. And this is typically where we'll bring the starter fertilizers in, getting them far enough away from the seed, but yet once we get germ, once we get emergence, that seminal system can get to this product very, very quickly. Then we relay again. We're going to go to the gauge wheels of the planter. This is Conceal. These blue lines you're seeing here, this is going to be some of my major horsepower products in regard to nitrogen, potassium, sulfur, and boron. Those are going to be the 4 products I can't put in the trench because it's going to hurt that seed. It's going to hurt germ. And so we just, that risk reward factor, right? It's just way too much risk. We got to get it out of there. And we put it 3 inches away from where that seed's planted. We're going about 1.5 inches deep. And this is really some nice placement. We go dual band, so we've got it on both sides of the row. And this has just been monstrous for us in setting up a really nice foundation for nutrition. But you count these applications. I already got one on my strip till rig, right, with my DAP and potash. I come in furrow jet center, that's going to be a second band. Wings give me 2 more. That's 3 and 4 bands. And then I've got 2 more with Conceal. Now we're running 5 and 6 bands of nutrition. I'm not slinging fertilizer anymore. I'm not broadcasting fertilizer. Why fertilize every square inch of the soil when every square inch of the soil is not going to have a root next to it? So that's why we're just constantly banding, trying to be as efficient as we can. Some might call this luxury consumption. I'll talk about this more as we go through. But why make a plant work hard to go find the nutrition? Why don't we put it in high concentrated bands and let the root grow through it and take what it wants? That to me is efficient feeding of the plant. There's a 368.2, and I guess this is interesting to look at. No, by the way, the 368.2 came from a DeKalb 6391. I also had a Golden Harvest 10D21 in this particular trial, and both were very high yielding. It's just I got that 368 from that DeKalb hybrid. But look at my control. So the control is over here on the lower left, and we're running 330 bushel corn. And a lot of people would say, well, Jason, those are pretty good yields, 330 bushel. I agree. I take that every single year. But here's the thing. That's just DAP and potash in the bottom of a strip. When I run my reallocation program, then I drop my dry rates and I come in and start looking at, okay, I'm going to put some product here in furrow jet center. Again, those sugar biologicals. We get an increase in yield. Now, I know I don't expect the world from furrow jet center or any type of in furrow, right up the gut. I'm limited to volume. I can't put very much there. I'm still waiting for some of these biologicals to come to market, and so maybe they can help me increase yield here. But I'm just sitting back thinking, okay, I'm going to try to build a foundation, protect, but I'm not expecting huge things from furrow jet center. However, I'll show you yield increases here in a minute, but I'm picking up yield here. Then I go to the wings. Look at the stair step effect. Look how I just keep going higher. Furrow jet wings, I'm picking up a little more. Then I go to Conceal by itself, and look at this. This is major horsepower with Conceal. I'm picking up some really nice yields here, and then I do them all together, and that's where I picked up the 368.2. Now, I know all this was not easy. It's not as easy as just calling somebody and say, go spread dry fertilizer, and I'm a one and done and finished. This is a lot tougher. I'm making the strips. I'm putting the band of dry in. Then I'm coming on the planter with 3 tanks and 3 pumps. One for furrow jet center, one for furrow jet wings, and one for conceal. I know that's a lot of messing around. And you're probably thinking, I mean, how in the world do we manage all this? I don't know that it was that difficult to do. Once we got it installed and once we got it up and running, it was fairly easy to manage. But I look at these yields that I'm picking up, and I don't want to go back to just dry fertilizer because I know what I'm missing. Okay, I know what's missing here. We're missing some extra yield if I don't, if I just use that dry fertilizer component. We call this the 5-point touch. Now, we've already got one band down with the strip till, but just on the planter, we've got 5 touches. We've got 3 in the trench. There's my furrow jet center, this middle orange one. Then I've got my wings, 3/4 of an inch out and higher. And then the blue lines are my conceal. You can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bands of nutrition happening. And I guess I think about a corn plant or a soybean plant. Germs comes up out of the ground, starts establishing that root system. And as that root system expands in size, we've got new bands of fertility right there available for the plant. A great analogy to this is us as individuals eating during the day. You wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast. You work hard all morning long. It gets to lunch, you're hungry again. You want to eat again. You have lunch, right? You go back to the field, you work until dinner time, and you eat a 3rd time. But if you were forced to only eat 1 time a day, no, you can't eat breakfast. No, you can't eat lunch. You can only eat dinner at the end of the day. How productive are you going to be? How efficient are you going to be? Here we're setting the stage up where we can continue feeding this plant, not slowing it down, and give us the yield that we're looking for. So this is where we've got some survey questions, and hopefully you guys will participate with this. This question is just simply, will you apply starter fertilizer on the planter this spring? And I don't know how many of you guys are going to do this or not, but if you guys would vote along here and just kind of help me out and tell me what you're thinking, that would be appreciative. We'll kind of see what we end up here for numbers. And I'll give a little bit of time for these numbers to change here a little bit. And this would be just like a starter phosphorus fertilizer. Don't consider nitrogen or anything like that. Just phosphorus.
Hey, Jason, I did have someone ask a question if you variable rate any of your fertilizer with your Montag bar.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, we have the ability to do the variable rate with the Montag. The plots that we've got set up, we haven't needed to do it where they're at here on the farm. But if we run into a situation where we need to do that, yes, we can do that, no problem. And I would encourage that to growers if they've got a good soil testing program with enough soil samples to determine whether we need to do that. When we picked this farm up here at PTI, I didn't know anything about the farm. Didn't know anything about yield history. I didn't know anything about what kind of fertility levels we've got in the farm. So we came in and we grid tested on 1.1 acre grids. And I don't know, when I first did that, I thought, well, I don't know how many people are going to be able to do something like this, but I am so glad that we did it because it just really shows the variability on the farm. It depended on where we put our trials in. This farm is split up into 3 areas. 2 of the areas are really good in fertility, constant values across the field, really in good shape. And then there's another section right along the interstate that's really tough. It's all across the board. So we traditionally, that's where our sandbox area is at, and that's where the reservoir is at. So we haven't had a lot of starter trials in that area. But again, to answer the question, we can variable rate. We just haven't had to on certain parts of our farm here. All right, so let me get a couple last votes in here. Okay. So it looks like 63% yes, putting starter on the planter. Let's just call it 60-40. 60 are doing it and 40% are not. All right. So you guys that are putting starter fertilizer on, how you doing it? Are you putting a pop-up or an in furrow in on the planter? Are you doing a 2x0, a 2x2? And again, this would mainly be like a phosphorus starter fertilizer, not nitrogen, just phosphorus. 2x2, one of the biggest trends in the industry right now is a 2x2x2. I really don't like that, or a 2x2, and we'll get into that here in a minute. But this is very common for starters to be, in the highest percentile range here. I did a meeting yesterday up near Rockford, and I think those guys were 80% pop-up or in furrow. And so that's a furrow jet, that's a Keaton seed firmer, a smart firmer, totally tubular, something like that. 2x2s of the world, I don't know. We'll get into this a little bit more. In the past, I was never a big advocate of it. And now we've got a 2x2x2. I kind of wonder how much of it actually is a 2x2x2, but that's a big trend, a big fad in the industry right now. And looks like those numbers just increased a little bit. So now we're tied to pop up in furrow at 43% and a 2x2x2 at 43 as well. So that is very interesting to me, how we're placing some of this starter product on the planter. That's very interesting. All right, let's go back to my 368.2. So I just want to show you a yield response, and it's fascinating to me. So lower left corner of my control, just dry fertilizer, DAP and potash. Look what happens when we start to reallocate. We put FurrowJet Center in. Again, I'm not expecting big things here, right? Sugars, biologicals. I pick up 5 bushel. Okay. Now everything from here is 2x. This was really interesting when we started to evaluate this data. From FurrowJet Center, guys, that's a 5 bushel response. What's 5 times 2? That's 10 bushel, right? That's what I'm picking up in FurrowJet wings. Okay, let's keep going. Now let's relay to Conceal. What's that 10 bushel times 2? 20 bushel. That's what we're getting from Conceal in a dual band treatment here. We add them all together, and that's where I picked up my 32 bushel. So one of the biggest things I've learned farming or doing the research trials, on the farm, doing a one and done just doesn't do it for me. Yes, it's easy. I call somebody and say, here, go spread my DAP and potash. I'm done. But I'm looking at the stair step effect. And this 2x factor is fascinating to me. 5 bushel from FurrowJet Center. Then it doubles to the wings, and that doubles when I go to Conceal. This excites me a little bit. And knowing the placement of these products, these planter attachments, I can put the right fertilizer where it needs to be, and we can dial in and increase yield. This was a lot of fun this year. And again, a big part of why we went to 368. There's that 5-point touch. I know I keep getting back to this, the logistics on the planter. We have to deal with it, and we can set it up, and we can drive yield. I remember one time we were doing a field day here at PTI, and we had 2 people movers out in the field. The front wagon seemed to be some of I'll call them the elderly statesmen, the older farmers, been farming a long time. A lot of those guys putting starter on the planter, some nitrogen too. Then the back wagon, we had some of the younger guys. They were the ones that, oh man, we just want to plant fast. You give us speed tube, give us a CCS planter, we're going to fill it all the way up with seed. And man, you want acres planted, we'll get you acres planted. They were also the ones though that said, don't slow us down by forcing us to put liquid on the planter. And so all day long, we're kind of fighting back and forth from front wagon to back wagon about how we're managing things on the farm. And we got talking about this liquid thing. And there was an older gentleman sitting in the very front row of the first wagon, and he raised his hand and I said, what's on your mind, sir? And he said, I just want to tell you and the whole group here that I put 68 gallon of liquid to the acre on my planter. And the back wagon, remember the younger guys that didn't want to use liquid, don't slow me down, right? They just erupted in laughter. And now the guy's mad because he wanted to tell us that he was putting 68 gallon of product on the planter on a per acre basis, but then now everybody's laughing at him. And so I went up to the gentleman and I said, sir, I said, why are you putting 68 gallon of liquid onto the acre with your planter? And he looked at me and he pointed right at me and he says, Jason, he says, that's how I get yield. He says, I know it's harder work. And yes, it takes me a little longer to plant. But he says, if I don't do it, my yield goes down. and there's total silence in both wagons now out in the field. The younger guys are saying, I get this now. Yes, I want to plant fast. I want to get acres completed quickly, but we still have to address this nutrition thing. And if we manage it right, we can have the best of both worlds. Here is I guess, what I went off of trying to get my recipe sheet, if you will, trying to get high yield. And I tell my kids this all the time. There's a right way, a wrong way, and a Jason Webster way. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I don't. It's just what I did. And so we try to, full disclaim, what we did here throughout the whole season. So I include the plant applications, the furrow jets, the conceals, even my side dress. We show you what we're doing in the side dress, the foliar treatments, compared to the control. So the control did get some of these as a normal program, but what we didn't do, we're seeing yield gains of 105.2 bushel to the acre. It's incredible. 105.2. Again, a lot of it's water, being able to irrigate, but part of this is nutrition as well. But look at those additional net economic gains over my control, bringing in another $200 an acre. That's sustainability, and we're excited about continuing this, not only this year, but for the years to come. Test weight. I'm really interested in test weight. If I was to come to you guys today and say, all right, we got to get high test weight out here in the field, what are you going to do to get it? And I just kind of wonder what the responses would be. In the past, really the only way to get purposely get high test weight is plant the right corn hybrid. And I've been so frustrated by that. I said, there's got to be something else that we can increase test weight on. Now look at these corn kernels here. I've got them laying on a quarter, a nickel, a penny, and a dime. And you know what they say, size does matter. I agree, but I want these things to be big, and I want them to weigh like lead. So again, I'll ask the question, how do you get corn to weigh heavy? This corn, when we took it to the elevator, we don't have a drying setup. We don't have bins here at the PTI farm yet. We will next year. But I'm taking it right to town. And I got a call from the fertilizer elevator manager, the grain fertilizer manager there. And we were delivering this corn in. He says, hey, where are you getting this corn from? And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, this corn's weighing 63 pounds. And I said, well, I knew it was heavy, and we were taking samples. And I said, why are you calling me about this? He says, well, the other corn coming in is like 56 or 57 pounds. And he used the phrase, the corn around the area just kind of died and dried. And looking back in August, yeah, we had a hot August. Didn't rain very much, and I did see a lot of corn in the countryside that just gave it up. It ran out of gas, and it just died, and it dried. But it wasn't high test weight corn. It was 56, 57 pound corn. Look at our 368.2 corn on the right. This green corn, that's 368. That's that DeKalb 6391. And the corn on the left is the corn that died and dried. That's the corn that I couldn't irrigate. It's dry land. It just ran out of gas. There's a big difference between these two pictures here. Now, we're out harvesting this corn, and there's a road that runs right along the Walmart pond that I showed you earlier. And we're harvesting right there along the road. And I'm in the combine, and there's this red pickup truck that comes flying down the road, and he opens the door really before the truck is stopped, and he jumps out. He runs across the ditch, climbs up the ladder of the combine, sits down in the buddy seat right next to me, and he looks at me and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean? We're combining a little bit of corn today." And he says, "Look at that corn. Look how green it is. There's no way in the world that corn can be dry." And I said, "Well, I don't know. You look at the yield monitor and you tell me." It was 24% corn, and this is what the corn looked like. And he says, "Well, how in the world did that happen? How do you have green, healthy corn and dry corn at harvest?" And I looked at him and I said, "Because we didn't kill it. We did not kill the corn. Yes, we gave it enough water. Yes, we gave it enough nutrients, but we kept it alive. And this is what it's supposed to look like. I don't want the corn to dent, guys, because then I know that it's going the other way on me and has the ability to die and dry. And so we want to keep this thing alive as long as we can. So big difference, and that's what's going to drive test weight. We've talked a lot with growers over the winter here, of how do we drive test weight. And I don't think we're going to do it with just a one and done DAP or a MAP and potash program. We got to do something to keep this corn happy. And it all comes back to the strip till and the bands. And I think we've been super successful with this. And again, I think mainly it's because we got rid of the ammonia, putting the dry fertilizer in the strip, doing a really good job on tillage. One of the things I've learned with strip till is these strips got to be wide enough, because if we're successful with strip till, we're going to do this tillage and we're not going to do anything until the planter comes back and we're going to drop a row unit and plant in that strip. So the strip's got to be wide enough to accommodate the row unit. So measure from gauge wheel to gauge wheel of your planter, and that's how wide these strips need to be. Guys, we're looking at a 10 to 11 inch strip is what we'd like. And I've had no-till guys come to me and say, well, Jason, you're doing too much tillage. And I said, well, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I got to make the strip wide enough to hold the planter unit. If I get the planter unit on, the gauge wheels are falling off the strip because the strip is too narrow. As soon as I start planting, those gauge wheels are just going to be chattering like crazy, and my planter performance just falls apart. So they've got to be wide enough. And that's why with a mole knife, we're getting enough lift and fracture. We're getting the berm, and it's been a wide strip, especially with this Kuhn-Krause Gladiator. We've had some pretty good success with it. Again, removing the ammonia, I can get in, make these as early as possible, and then we're good to go. One thing, I mentioned it earlier, I don't like making these strips when we're wet. We're just smearing. We're not getting the lift and fracture. I'm relying on the strip till to take care of compaction in the field, the compaction that I'm creating with the combine, the trips across the field, the auger cart, things like that. I need the lift. But if it's wet, I'm just smearing. And you can cut a cross section of this strip when we're wet, and you can just see the air pocket down at the bottom. You can take your fist and you can shove her down in there. If that's happening, you either have to shallow up or you've got to wait for drier conditions. With strip till, we say we need to have a plan A, plan B, and plan C. Plan A would be make the strips in the fall and plant into them in the spring successfully. That's plan A. That's what everybody wants. Plan B is, what if we get maybe in a situation this week, they're calling for some rain this week. Some weather forecasters are saying heavy rain. What if we get heavy rain now that we've got the frost out of the ground and we start getting water running down the hills and into these strips? Now we can come in plan B and freshen. We run fresheners here at the farm where we need to rejuvenate a strip. It is an extra pass. I don't like that, but we can come in and kind of repair a strip if we have to. Lastly, plan C would be we got to tear it up and start over again. And I know nobody wants to do that, but sometimes it happens. But the thing to remember is, even if I do tillage to get rid of these strips, I'm still planting over these strips, because that's where my fertilizer band is. That does not change. Now, we did a little bit of comparing broadcast dry fertilizer compared to the same rates in my strip till band. In this past fall, when we harvested, we saw a 17.6 bushel advantage for banding fertilizer in the bottom of a strip versus just blasting it, slinging it on top of the ground in a conventional spreading type system. That 17.6 bushel to the acre times the price of corn, which we're using $3.75, which I think that's very conservative, especially looking at prices now, but that's a rolling average, cash price average of 2020 corn from October 19 to October 20. But that 17.6 bushel yield increase times $3.75 is a $52 win. We talk about this every day at the PTI farm when folks come to visit us. What can you do on your farm to make an extra $50 an acre? What can you do on the farm to make an extra $100 of the acre? The sustainability, that's what we focus on. And here, my bill that I'm going to get in my mailbox from my ag retailer is going to be the same whether I broadcast it or whether I strip till it. It's the same amount of fertilizer, but I'm bringing in another $50 of farm family revenue. That to me makes a lot of sense. Yes, I probably need to absorb some costs into this because strip till is not as easy, right? I've got some equipment charges in here. I do have the cost of strip tilling in here. I just don't have any labor involved in it. Okay. And so that's one thing, time in the fall. And if you can't manage it, then you're going to have to hire it out. But I do have the cost of strip tilling in here. I just don't have any labor, my time factored into it. What about the efficiency of bands? We get this question a lot, and I do think there's a lot of merit to this. If I put fertilizer in a high efficient band, can I reduce some of my fertilizer that I'm applying? It's a very general question here at PTI, happens all the time. And so we've got testing in place for corn and for soybeans where we soil test, we figure out, okay, what is that 100% rate of my phosphorus and potassium? And we put that 100% rate on as a broadcast, side by side, to putting her in the bottom of a strip with strip till. Then we start backing rates down by 25%. We go from 100 to 75. We take that 75 down to 50, down to 25, and then we'll put zero fertilizer on. Now, putting zero fertilizer on, I can probably get by for a year or two with no fertilizer. I'm going to deplete the soil, right? I want to find out how long I can go with putting zero fertilizer on. What happens to yield? What happens to soil test levels? Same thing with my 25% rate discrepancy. What does that do to build up removal and recommendation rates for dry fertilizer in a band? Can I reduce my fertilizer rate? I don't know the answer to this, and I think it could vary on a farm by farm basis, but we need to start looking at this on this farm. And this is a 10-year program, guys. This isn't a 1-year plot system and done. These plots are always going to be in the same spot, and we're always going to come back to them for comparisons. I hope I'm around in the next 10 years to see the overall results of this, but this should be really interesting. Number 2 on our ROI list, we've talked about corn up until now, but now we transition to soybeans. Soybeans do show up in my top 5. And they're 20-inch row soybeans. I don't know how many folks are using 20-inch row beans, but I'll tell you a little story. We had a 20-inch row planter here at the PTI farm to evaluate 20-inch row corn. And I needed some beans planted, and the only planter available was this 20-inch row planter. And I said, that'll work, let's go. And so we planted these beans in 20 inches. They came up just fine. And then it came to me bringing the sprayer out to do my herbicide pass post on these 20-inch row beans. And I've got a Hagie STS 10 sprayer, and I pulled out into the field, and I looked down in my tires. I got a 14.9 tire on my Hagie sprayer, and they fit down a 20-inch row. It never really dawned on me until then. But yes, 15-inch rows are probably prevalent across a lot of the countryside. But with 15-inch rows, we fight tooth and nail to get every bean up out of the ground. But then what do we do when we go spray it? We run them over and we kill them. Congratulations. And so that's one of the benefits of a 20. Guys ask me all the time, what's the difference between a 20-inch row bean and a 15-inch row bean? I say nothing until you spray them. You're going to run over the 15s and 20s. You're going to be able to stay down the row. Now, in this 2 of my ROI items, these 20-inch row beans are irrigated with my drip that we talked about with corn. They are strip till. So again, we're not just strip tilling corn, we're strip tilling beans, and we are adding a cover crop to these beans as well. And I know cover crops are a huge deal out across the countryside. I've been challenged by them. I've said in the past, jokingly, well, I don't know, I guess I kind of mean it a little bit. I guess it's probably true to some degree, but the only guys making money off a cover crop system out in the field are the guys selling the cover crop seed. And I say that because it's not exactly true, but I say that because I've been frustrated with it. I failed putting a cover crop system in. I don't have the length of growing system to get the crop growing that I want. Multi-species radishes I failed with because I can't plant them in June or July. And it's been interesting looking at cover crops. However, I do think I got a pretty good win with this one. Now, you guys tell me what kind of soybean yields, what's the highest yield you guys have ever raised on the farm? And maybe it's not a whole field average, maybe it's a section of a farm, but what kind of yields you guys running? We'll wait to get a couple votes in here. I usually ask this question before I tell everybody my yield. I ask everybody else's. Now, I think the Livingston County soybean average yield is like 54 bushel. It's nothing fabulous by any means. So we'll let these numbers kind of fluctuate here a little bit and kind of see what we end up with. I don't know how many people are being truthful, but 38% of the folks being putting answers into the survey growing 100 bushel beans and more. I hope it's true. I hope that's fantastic. And that's incredible. That would be fantastic if it's true. 13% running 90 to 99. That's fabulous. 80 to 89 at 25%. I mean, I do think, I'm going to be north of you guys, quite a bit. And I struggle with length of growing season for beans. You guys are going to have a longer growing season. So I do think you guys have the opportunity to grow higher yielding beans than what I have the opportunity to do here in Pontiac. So I'm encouraged to see some of these high yields. Now, while we're on the survey here, tell me what row width you guys are on. I just kind of curious to see with some of these yields you guys are bringing in, what kind of row width are you on? We'll let a couple of these votes come in. Yeah, I see 15-inch row beans. Yeah, I think every meeting I go to, those primarily are the most acres that we're dealing with soybeans. There's been a couple locations during the winter here where 30-inch rows were pretty prevalent. Depends where you go. Very common question I get is, I've got the perfect corn planter set up to plant corn on 30-inch rows. Can I use it to plant soybeans? Yeah, sure you can. But yeah, the biggest percentage is definitely 15-inch row beans. Some 22-inch beans, we see a lot of that as we go north, especially up into sugar beet country. Yeah, it's interesting. All right, well, here's my yield. This year in 2020, we went 101.3. Boy, we barely made 100 bushel beans. Just by just by a little bit there. I was worried because we were so wet early. Beans had wet feet. I didn't think we were going to make it, but our control was 75.7 bushel. And the thing that I'm thoroughly impressed with, beans love water late, and when I can come in and irrigate them, boy, we've seen some really nice yields. Look at that. That's a 19.9 bushel yield increase in beans. I mean, seriously, what can you do to get a 19 bushel yield increase in beans? Water's a huge one for us. Now, we set it up with our nutritional program like we kind of talked about in corn. That's a big part of it. But feeding water to these beans late has been tremendous for us. Look at our, we're planting them at 130,000 in this particular case. We've got a foliar nutrition program, a fertigation program, setting it up with Furoject and Seal, and here's a 25 bushel win. But just huge numbers here. And I'm still a rookie with this irrigation thing. We've only been doing this for just a couple years now, but it's been really easy to drive soybean yield with having irrigation opportunities on beans. Now, the cover crop thing, I mentioned that this was in a cover crop scenario. I've been so frustrated with a cover crop. I mean, how do you grow like a ryegrass or something like that and it gets 8 feet tall? How do you bring a planter in and deal with this stuff? How do you deal with the biomass, all the vegetation? And I said, guys, I'm just not going to mess with it. I'm not going to fight it, okay? And so I do consider a cover crop seeding as, it's a two-pass situation, right? You got to have the application of the cover crop seed, and then you're going to come in with the planter. I don't know how we get around it. It doesn't matter if you're, planting it in the ground with the seeder or you're doing it with an airplane. It's still an application, right? A second pass. I come in with this rig. This is a bar we've got set up where I can move these row units to whatever row spacing. They're set up on 20 inches right now. And I got my blower system up here. We put our cover crop seed in the fall. This would be right after we harvest corn, okay? And the old corn stalk rows, these wheels are going to drive right over those corn stalk rows, okay? And these wheels are like a rotary hoe wheel on steroids. They're quite a bit heavier, and there's 4 of them right here. And we'll just, we got airbags up here. We'll put down pressure on this rig, and we'll kind of chew that stalk up a little bit, start that degradation process. And we'll put a cover crop in there, but they're on 20 rows. Then I come in with my strip till bar, okay, and I'll make strips in between where I planted the cover crop. Then I bring my planter in and I plant right into it. Now it's still, I've got 2 trips with the strip till and the seeding, I'd love to be able to do it all in one pass. But for right now, we do have 2 trips. So we're trying to evaluate how we fix it. I don't know how I'm going to get around that unless I can actually do this process while I'm making my strips. And we probably could. But this has been great for us just to test the system. But it's been easy. When I bring the planter back in, I'm not in this mess of a cover crop. I am in between it. And it's been very simple. I guess call it cheating, if you will. But it's been an easy process to manage.
Jason,
Yeah.
we had a question pop up here. What do you consider late irrigation on beans at setting pods?
Well, okay, so look at this picture here. I got my drip tape on. The thing I like to do with beans is come in at about 3rd or 4th trifoliate, probably earlier the better, and we'll tissue test, and we come in with just a little bit of shot of nutrition. And then I'm basically done. I'll flush with a little bit of water once we get the nutrition on that we need. That's going to be a little bit of potassium, depending on a tissue where we're at, but potentially some boron, manganese, sulfur. Sulfur would be another one. But we come in, we give a little bit of shot there, and then I'm not doing anything until probably R2, R3. Bringing the water in then. Of course, it's going to depend on weather, and if we're hot and dry, I'm going to try to cool the plant down as much as I can, but I could do small amounts of water just to keep it cooler. But we're really going to drive home the water from R3 on, and we're going to try to grow seed size. I want big soybeans. When you guys harvest beans and take them to the elevator, we want big beans, and I think this is the way that we're doing that. We're still putting our disease prevention methodology out here with our fungicide applications. We scout. That's going to be in addition to this, but that's how we're going to manage it. Typically, it's not going to be a lot of water early. It's going to be a lot of water late. But look at the root mass. This drip line, actually, I'm a slow process putting water on with drip. I can get about a 1/4 inch a day on. And when I turn the pressure up to get a little bit more, sometimes this tape will explode on me, and I got to go out and mend this. I got to fix it. But when I go out there, it'll be like a garden hose just shooting water out, and it will cause erosion. It will melt soil away, and you will expose the root system. And one day I'm out here looking at these roots, and I'm like, wait a minute. And like, that does not look like a soybean root system to me. That looks like more like corn. And we start digging them up a little bit, and you can kind of see it in here. There's nodulation on these roots. And most people would say soybeans have a taproot. That taproot's going to drill right down to the soil profile. Guys, this is not a taproot. We're putting water, nutrition right here. We're starting with the planter, right, in our strip. But then look at this. It's like these beans know that the water and nutrition is right there, and we get this explosion of activity right here. That's a big fibrous root system, and I can feed that thing super easy. Look where that drip line's at compared to where those roots are at. It's amazing. Here's the other thing. You can go to a 20-inch or a 30-inch row soybean, and you can just lightly take your hand and dig down about a 1/2 inch, and you will find roots in the center of the row. Guys, that's not a taproot. I mean, this is changing the architecture of the root system of a soybean plant, and now we can feed it. We can go after this thing and give it what it wants. We just got to be smart enough to figure out what it needs. But I love the way this thing looks. And again, some of those 19 to 25 bushel yield increases that we're getting on beans, this is where it's happening right here. This is very exciting. Number 3 on our list comes to nitrogen. Seems like every top 10 list has got nitrogen on it for corn. But we call this the triple split program. We are a big believer in split applications of nitrogen. And to do split applications of nitrogen, we're going to use the planter. You may see this picture on the screen and say, yep, that's a planter. I agree with you. But I also look at this picture and say, this is my nitrogen applicator, at least one of them. And so with the planter pass, planting corn, we want to put nitrogen on. And with this planter, this front tank, just under 500 gallon, this is how we're putting 32 on through conceal. And this has been really big horsepower for us in driving corn yields. Here's our conceal. We're going through the gauge wheel. We're not hanging these 2x2 units up front. The darn planter's too heavy the way it is. We're going in with existing real estate through the gauge wheel. We have like an inverted knife. When you guys think of a tillage knife, you think of a forward-facing knife that's going to plow through, lift, and fracture. We don't want to do that. We're right next to the seed trench, the furrow. We don't want to do that. So we kind of turn the knife around a little bit, put a spring on top of it, and we drag it. We make our line of application, okay? We've got a little furrow here, if you will, and then the gauge wheel sets down on top of it and then collapses that furrow where we've applied our nitrogen, and it seals it. We don't need a volatilization product, a stabilizer to go with this, because we're using the gauge wheels to collapse that trench and cover this product up so it's safe. We've tested this with stabilizers and without, and we just don't see any benefit from a stabilizer in a concealed system, because generally we are going to close that trench, attach it to moisture, and protect it. So there's that gauge wheel. You see the cutout in the middle here. That's where the knife resides, and I'll get this video going. The blue bands are our application. We'll spin this thing around. You can go dual band, which I have, both sides of the row here, or you could go single. It's your preference. But there's that knife in the center of the gauge wheel. It's going to leave a little furrow here, and the gauge wheel is just going to collapse it, press down with the weight of that row unit, and we're going to collapse it, and we're going to protect it. This is 3 inches away from where the seed's planted, and I'm running about 1.5 inches in depth. I'm not going to go real deep with this product. I just got to get it covered and protected. The blue circles, that's where the placement is. And look at that seed. I'm designating here. I'm planting the seed at 2 inches in depth. And you can see these blue circles are above planting depth. Okay, that's 1.5 inches. One of the exciting things about this is look at the crown roots. Now think about how a corn plant grows. This plant, let's just say it's almost V3. The seed and seminal root are going to feed this corn plant up until V3. And then it's done. It's done what it's had to do. Thank you very much. Then we transition to the crown root. The crown root formation, feeding the plant, happens at V3, kind of a baton transfer, if you will, and it will start feeding that corn plant. But look at the 35-degree angle of this crown root growing right through that high concentrated zone that we applied with Conceal. It's just a really nice place. Nice placement. We can put high salt products. It's far enough away from the seed. We're not going to run into any crop safety issues, but as soon as we get crown root formation, that product is waiting there, and we can get this into the plant pretty quick. One might say that this is that luxurious consumption that we talked about earlier. Why make a corn plant fight to find the fertilizer product? We're going to force it to grow right through it. Now, let's talk placement here a little bit. And I do this with a lot of farmers, and this has been really interesting to see. Now, I think it was 60% of you guys said you're putting starter fertilizer on the planter. Don't think about nitrogen for a moment here. Just think about your phosphorus starter fertilizer. This placement you see on the screen, that blue dot, what is that placement? Is it pop-up, a 2x2, or a 2x0? This one's really easy, right? 100% of you are saying pop up or in furrow. And you would be right. Okay, now it gets harder, trust me. All right, let's go to something else here. Now look at the blue dot on this one. And remember, I'm planting corn 2 inches in depth. Is this a 2x2, a 2x0, or a pop up or in furrow? And I'll wait for the votes to come in here a little bit, because this one's interesting to me. Numbers are dancing around, but we're tied at 50-50. This is why we do this placement talk, because I have good news and bad news. The good news is 50% of you are right. The bad news is 50% of you are wrong. And it doesn't matter where I go. Yesterday, I was in Rockford, and I think the data showed up almost exactly like this, 50-50. Guys, with 2-inch planted corn, that blue dot on the screen is a 2x0. And I don't know what the deal is with I go to a grower and say, how are you putting your starter fertilizer on? And say, oh yeah, I'm using a 2x2. And I have to ask them what attachment they're using to figure out what the placement actually is. But directionally, we got to go from the seed. This is a 2x0. It's 2 inches over, and then the 0 means we don't move directionally from there. 2x0. The good thing about this is most growers who say they're a 2x2 are a 2x0, and I would much prefer a 2x0 than a 2x2. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, what is this one? Now, dribble placement, I don't think it's going to be dribble, so you got a 50-50 shot on this one. And everybody should get this right after the last one where I showed everybody what a 2x0 is. This is going to be a 2x2. We're going 2 inches over and 2 inches down from the seed. So there's two problems with this method, in my opinion. I was using this placement, this 2x2 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, putting starter fertilizer on a planter, and I was frustrated. I said, man, this thing ain't working. Yes, I can get corn to look greener. I can get it to be a little taller. I can even get it maybe a point to a point and a half drier at harvest time, but it still wasn't paying for itself as a starter fertilizer. And I'm thinking, what is going on? What am I doing wrong? And I was ready to give up. But then I got thinking, like, where is the mouth of a corn plant? If I'm putting a starter fertilizer on, I need that starter to get into a corn plant early in the season. How early is the question now? Well, we know a corn plant is going to set the first yield determination at growth stage V5. Let's say this corn plant is at V3 right now on the screen. That would tell me I've got 2 leaves to put on a corn plant, and it's going to set yield. It's going to set rounds. Congratulations, you got a 14, 16, 18, or 20 round on that ear, okay? But if this plant is V3 and I'm going to go to V5, that's 2 leaves. How long does it take to put a new corn leaf on a plant? Good growing conditions is probably going to be about 3 days. That means that in 6 days, this plant, the root system of that plant has got to get to that blue dot down there at the 4-inch level in that 2x2 placement, get that fertilizer into the plant, metabolize it, think it's having a great day, and give us 2 more rows around. And guys, we're going to miss the nick. That fertilizer is too deep. It is too far away from the mouth of a corn plant. The best analogy I can talk about with this is, you're going to go and have lunch today. Let's just say you go to the local diner and you order a cheeseburger. And if you take that cheeseburger and you shove it up to your ear and hold it there, how much nutrition are you going to get from that cheeseburger that's up in your ear? You're not going to get any nutrition from it. And here's the worst part about it. You're going to smell it, okay, because it's close to the mouth, but you're still not going to get any in your mouth. And you're going to see it as well. Out of the corner of your eye, you're going to see that cheeseburger up in your ear. But you're not going to get any nutrition in the mouth of that corn plant. That's what I struggled with 2x2 years ago. That's why it wasn't working, because I couldn't get this early season phosphorus into the mouth of a corn plant. Number one, it was too far away placement wise. And with phosphorus, once you put it in the soil, it does not move. And so I looked at this and I said, I'm doing this totally wrong. And that's why we got away from this 2x2 thing and transitioning the product to the mouth of a corn plant. And now we're starting to win. Here's the other problem. And I'm really worried for you guys that are south of me, especially when we get into some of these tougher clay soils. How in the world are you going 4 inches deep with your starter fertilizer in some of those clay soils? I fear that we're smearing. It's hard enough to get the soil fit at the 2-inch line where we're planting this corn, let alone going another 2 inches deeper. And we have the ability to create a wall right here, a soil density layer, a compaction layer here. And so now your root system comes up to the compaction line and it can't go anywhere. It's just a wall right there. And so those are the 2 reasons that I just don't prefer a 2x2 system. I think it's wrong. And for a starter fertilizer system, it just doesn't work. Even nitrogen, if you want to put nitrogen on in this situation, I think it's too deep. I think you're going to give it a head start. That root system is never going to be able to catch up to it, because once you put nitrogen in the soil and you get a rain, it's going to move down through the soil profile. And why give it a head start? Don't give it a head start to the finish line of this race. This is and you guys don't have to, you can vote if you want, but I'll just give it away. This is a 2x2x2. And there's a lot of folks out there saying, oh yeah, 2x2x2 is the greatest thing in the world. This is a big trend. It's a big fad in the industry right now. I think it's a fallacy. I don't think there's fertilizer attachments that are truly going 2x2x2. Again, 2 inches over from the seed, 2 inches in depth. Now you've got 2 walls around this corn plant, and you've got maybe a prison, in my opinion. You know, you're causing smear lines on both sides now, and you've got that problem. And again, you're too far away from these roots, especially to get the phosphorus in early season. If we turn off cold and we turn off wet, this place deep, you're going to have that corn plant growing too slow, and that root system will never get to that phosphorus to help as a starter, trying to give us that extra 2 rows round. It's just not going to work. This is what we call furrow jet. Now, when we think of phosphorus, this is where I want to position the phosphorus right here, because that seminal root, remember, it's going to grow to growth stage V3. And so I've got access to the seminal root there. And then once we go to the crown root here after V3, I've got the ability to continue feeding the plant right there. So it's all about early season positioning. If we turn off cold and wet, I need to have phosphorus somewhere right here to make this corn plant not go into defense mode and not give me a 14 round. Give me a 16, 18, or 20. Give me at least 2 more rows round. Now we come back full circle to the conceal. Okay, now we can kind of understand placement of this thing. It's not this 2x2 down here at 4 inches. Look at that crown root growing right through that zone, the luxury consumption that we're talking about. This primarily for me is going to be nitrogen, sulfur, boron, and potassium. Those cannot go next to the seed. We're going to have some crop safety issues. So this is how we position this product. I just did an Inside PTI video the other day. This will be coming out here really quick. Talking about single band versus dual band nitrogen on the planter. I know we've talked a lot about phosphorus up until now, but with nitrogen on the planter, we've gone back and we've looked. Do I need both of these blue application circles, or can I get by with just one? Here's the conceal unit up here. Can I put nitrogen on with just one of these knives, or do I need both? I went back and looked at 2019 and 2020, where we were putting half of our nitrogen on with the planter and the other half with a side dress after the corn came up. And we had a 7.1 bushel advantage for dual band over the single. That times the price of corn is about a $26 win. However, my general rule of thumb when it comes to single versus dual band nitrogen with conceal is I think it's rate dependent. If you're 20 gallon or more, my preference would be having the dual band. If you're under 20 gallon, in my opinion, I do think you can get away with the single band just fine. And remember, with conceal, the mounting bracket, you're going to get the mounting bracket that is designed to hold both wheels, both knives. You can still just put one of them on, and if you ever want to come back and add the other one, you're able to do it, okay? But nitrogen with conceal on the planter has been huge horsepower with us. You know, I asked you guys earlier, how many of you guys, I asked you earlier how many are putting phosphorus on the planter. What about nitrogen? How many of you guys are actually putting just nitrogen on the planter? And I think this one's been changing in the past couple years. I think more guys are looking at nitrogen on the planter with some of the work that's being done and some of the nice attachments we have. It's making it easier to do. But I do think a lot of guys are seeing the yield responses and they're wanting to do more of it. I'm encouraged that we're running about 60-40 here. Well, now we're tied 50-50. But half of the growers say they are putting on nitrogen. Okay, so you 50%ers out there that are putting nitrogen on, how are you putting nitrogen on the planter? Are you doing it through like conceal? Are you dribbling out the back? There's some closing wheels, the in-betweens, you can apply that way. Or is it that 2x2 system that I mentioned earlier that I really don't like? I'll let some of these votes come in here. I mean, I get the dribbling out the back. I mean, 25% of you currently are say you're doing that. I mean, I think it's easy. I think it's very economical to do it. I just don't know that it's the safest thing in the world, leaving nitrogen on top of the soil surface. We can put a nitrogen stabilizer with it to buy us a little bit of time. But again, I don't know. That's a pretty expensive crop input just to be laying right on top of the ground. Closing wheel in between, 33%. Typical 2x2. I don't know if I like that very well, but that I would say those are similar trends than what we've seen across the country, even into Canada as we've talked to growers. So nothing out of the ordinary here. This is why I like dual band nitrogen on the planter. Look at this corn here to the right. Now this is the same hybrid of corn, same rate of nitrogen. You see this guy over here on the left. Look how yellow this is. Again, this is the only difference here is a weed and feed application. This is surface applied nitrogen. Remember the dribble out the back? I mean, yeah, that's in a band, but it's on top of the ground. You know, here we've got dual band inserted 1.5 inches deep on both sides of this row. And boy, this corn plant's not slowing down. This was a situation in the spring.
Jason,
yeah.
you're breaking up really bad on us.
Oh. Can you hear me okay now?
Nope.
No. All right. How's that? Is that any better? All right. Is that working?
Still nothing. Whenever you clicked there, I heard the sound from your computer, but I can't hear your voice.
Okay. Nothing at all?
Now I can.
Now you can. Okay. All right, good. So let me go back one here. Guys, here's the thing with nitrogen on the planter. We're seeing similar yield responses to nitrogen on the planter than, similar to side dressing. So here's data from 19 that shows a 14 bushel advantage when we side dress. But when we add nitrogen on the planter, we're getting another 14 bushel. I'm getting both. And I do think that's really interesting. This is data from 2020, 19 bushel from side dressing corn. But when I add nitrogen on the planter, in addition to that, I'm picking up 7 to 10 bushel gains. And so generally, when we put nitrogen on the planter, we do set a foundation up to get higher yield. What made the top 5 is this triple split program. And I really like this program. Here's what it is. It's 25% of my total nitrogen with this sprayer. When I have to put a herbicide out, and when I run my sprayer out with my 32% UAN, I do not carry water. I don't believe in it. I run 32%. So a lot of times this is near 17 gallon of product to the acre. Okay, for you guys filling this thing up and tendering it, that's 17 gallon to the acre. The nitrogen I'm putting on here, I'm using that to prime the system. The nitrogen I'm applying here does not get into the corn that you see that I'm side dressing here. It's not available yet. I'm using this to speed up and increasing the ability for mineralization later in the growing season. That's how I'm addressing the carbon penalty and trying to get late season mineralization to happen. I know I need moisture for this. I know I need the right temperatures, but that's how we're setting the stage up to break down carbon. That's 25% of my total N. Then another 25% of my total N comes on the planter with conceal. When the corn comes up, it's got half the nitrogen on it. Then I simply come in and I finish. And I would say the picture you're seeing here of this corn is probably too small a corn. I've got a larger window. Here's if you want to come in and wide drop, I think that's fine. You can side dress it when the corn's waist high. You've got all kinds of options here. The thing I like about this program is this. Are you a grower that can find nitrogen deficiency in a field, recognize it, react, and go fix it? That is a popular question that a lot of farmers get a little scared about. I don't think we scout our fields well enough. One could argue even at all. And we don't know what's happening in the field. So why run the risk? Why go down the road of giving yourself an opportunity to run out of nitrogen? And what I mean by that is this program sets the stage so we're not going to run out of nitrogen unless it just rains every single day and we flush all the nitrogen out of the ground, and then we need to readdress. But most of the time, this system is going to allow us to finish and have a really sound nitrogen program. If you're a grower that cannot recognize nitrogen deficiency, react and go replace it, I don't know that we need to put ourselves in the situation to run out of nitrogen. So I don't want to overspend here. I'm not putting more nitrogen on than what I want. I'm just split applying, spoon feeding along, if you will. And it's been really nice placement and been very efficient and done very well for us. How well? About $50 an acre, $49.57 an acre. And this is over 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. 4 years, nitrogen on the planter, bringing in another $50 an acre. And it's just from flat out yield, more bushels times the price of corn. We're bringing in another $50 by putting nitrogen on the planter. Again, here, you've got to evaluate what is the cost of your tanks and pumps on a planter, and then the logistics of management. But again, that carrot's hanging out there for us. We know we can grab more revenue if we go to the higher management of nitrogen on the planter. Number 4, gets back to soybeans again. 30-inch row beans. We talked about 20-inch row beans last time. These are, again, strip till. They are irrigated. The thing I want to mention here is we can grow high-yield soybeans in a 30-inch row. I think narrows are gonna beat them. I think our track record right now is 4.4 bushel advantage for narrows over wides. But the thing, if somebody comes to me and says, all right, we're going to put 30-inch row beans in, I want to set it up with nutrition. Okay. And this is very similar to what we did with corn. Here's my control. Okay. Running 79 bushel beans. Here's furrow jet center, furrow jet wings. This is when I do wings and center together. And then here's conceal in the yellow. And there's everything combined. I'm going to feed these beans correctly to get these 30 inches to give me everything they've got. Don't slow them down. Here's the recipe we were running for some of our high yield 30-inch row beans last year. Again, just as a full disclaimer, we're going strip, the dry in the bottom of the strip, furrow jet center, furrow jet wings, conceal, just like we talked about with corn. But we end up with this 5-point touch. And again, I think this is critical. To set this foundation up to continue feeding these beans, set that foundation so we can get flowering as fast as possible, and we keep a lot of these flowers. We abort so many of these flowers. Let's keep a bigger percentage here, and let's grow yield. How many of you guys are putting starter on beans? I asked you this on corn. This generally is a fairly low number. A lot of times this is less than 20%. And in East Central Illinois, where I'm at, there's very few guys putting starter on beans. There we're running about 80-20, I guess is what it is. But I do think it's a little tougher with soybeans, depending on your planter attachment, because usually with soybeans, we have the ability to salt off a little easier. So we have to be a lot more gentle with these soybean seeds. The thing I want to show you on 30-inch row beans is, I just said I want to be gentle with some of the fertilizer that I'm using, or at least that's what I always thought in the past. Now I've got these attachments that I can bring in the heavy hitters, the salt products, and I can drive soybean yield. I want to go to, look at the furrow jet center here. We're picking up 2.4 bushel. The wings 3.4. Those are okay, but look at the yellow here. This is straight conceal with a 10.5 bushel win. That's monstrous here, and that's that dual band application on these beans. It's incredible. Look at the individual response. Now, I lost money on furrow jet center this year. I need to probably find some new sugars biologicals to go in the furrow here. I lost money. I lost $2. It tells me I got a little bit of yield response, but the cost just outweighed the yield. So I got to reevaluate there. But I go to furrow jet wings, and that's a pretty nice gain there, $15. I go to center furrow jet and wing furrow jet, and it just tells me that the center didn't work. Again, just kind of reiterates that. But look at the yellow bar here. That's straight conceal. That's dual band conceal on 30-inch row soybeans. That's almost a $37 win. That's a big portion of the overall $47 we're picking up as a total package. And so this is what we're really focusing on these beans, is this dual band application through Conceal. We're running a product. It's a 14-12-4-6. Anybody could go out and make this product. We are getting it from Marco Fertilizer. We went to Marco Fertilizer when we first got Conceal. So get this, guys. Precision Plantings R&D department comes to me and says, hey, we got this Conceal product. Will you put this on the farm, the research farm, and test it for nitrogen? I say, sure, I'll do it. And so we go out and we test it on corn. And then I had a few acres left to plant of soybeans. And I looked at Conceal and I said, what product am I going to put through Conceal? And I didn't know. So I called my friends at Marco and I said, hey, I want you to come to the farm. I want you to look at Conceal. Tell me what you think about putting a nutrition product in Conceal for soybeans. They look at Conceal, they go back to their office, they do some calculating, figuring out what we could apply. They come back with this 14-12-4-6. And I had told the guys at Marco, I said, we need something that's economical. I don't want a really expensive fertilizer product here, but I also think it's got to have sulfur with it. You know, we're in a situation where we need to put sulfur for corn and soybeans. But the question is, on soybeans, how do you do it? Yes, we could go a dry ammonium sulfate, blast it on top, sling it on top of the ground. But how do you band it? And we looked at Conceal and we said, this is going to be the way we're going to do this. And guys, this is 3-year data, 2018, 2019, and 2020, where these are $46 wins at a 10-gallon rate of this 14-12-4-6. It's been a product at 10 gallon to the acre that has never lost me money. Never. In the years we've tested this thing, since we created this thing, it's never lost me money on a per acre basis. Now, we go to some higher rates, 15 gallon and 20 gallon, you know, sometimes our yield plateaus and then the cost outweighs it a little bit. But at 10 gallon to the acre, this has been a nice program. When this product came out, it was $1.80 a gallon. So 10 gallon times $1.80 is $18 to the acre. And we just suck back our DAP and potash and reallocate. And so this is a free program. And it's given us some pretty nice yield. You can generally see it right to the row where we've got this 14-12-4-6 applied in dual band on soybeans. Lastly, number 5. This one's kind of a fun one, and would appreciate some help on this one from all you guys. About a year ago, I had a grower came to me and says, hey, I'd like you to test strip cropping. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, I want you to plant alternate strips of corn and beans out in the field. And I said, why do you want me to do this? And he says, well, it's all about sunlight management. And so he wanted me to plant strips of corn, strips of soybeans all the way across the field. And I did it. And again, the whole idea with this is your outside corn rows next to the beans are going to get more sunlight, and we're going to try to drive yield on the outside edges. So I said, all right, let's evaluate this. I said, I have evaluated this for a long time. Matter of fact, the last time we did it, we were really trying to evaluate what direction to plant corn and soybeans, north and south or east and west, which, by the way, these rows of corn and soybeans are, in fact, planted in a north-south fashion, okay? So you see all the replications we've got of this. I think we had like 13 reps out in the field. And if you're going to do this as a grower, you got to be organized. And I say that because, you know, if you had to do this on every acre of your farm, how would you do your herbicide program? Because remember, when you come in and spray your soybeans, you don't want to be spraying a product that's going to ding up your corn, because on the outside edges of your corn, that's where you're trying to get the high yield. So if you're dinging it, you're killing it, causing crop injury, it just defeats the purpose of this whole plot system. So when I put this together, I said, I'm going to go Liberty on everything. Okay. We're going to go a dual product down for the corn and beans both. And then we're going to come in with Liberty beans, Liberty corn. And I guess for me, my management style, I got a lot going on with the research farm. Every night when I go to bed, I think about what's the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow morning. It's how I stay organized, or at least try to. And one night this summer, okay, I'm thinking, what's the first thing I'm going to do in the morning? And the answer was, I'm going to go spray this corn in this strip cropping study. Okay, we were getting to the right growth stage where I needed to come in and spray it. And so Liberty corn, where is my Liberty at? Do I have enough water at the farm? Where's everything at? Just trying to get everything situated. I fall asleep. I wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and for some reason I'm thinking about this Liberty corn. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, I don't remember what corn hybrid I planted in this study. I said, it's got to be a Liberty corn. And I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute. There's Smart Stacks corn, there's VT, double corn. Which one's Liberty tolerant? Which one's not? I'm going through all that in my head. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, I had my iPad in the cab of the tractor. I'll just go get the iPad and I'll look at the hybrid that I typed in when I planted this thing. And so I get up out of bed and I go to the office there in the house and looking for the iPad. And sure enough, it wasn't there. And so I still didn't have an answer. And I'm worried about this thing. And so I get dressed. I drive to PTI. I go to the office there. I find the iPad. And I had entered a number, a hybrid in on the iPad that wasn't even an actual hybrid. I typed it in incorrectly. So I still didn't know if this was a Liberty corn or not. So I said, all right, fine. I'm gonna kind of deviate from the plan here. You see this gravel road up here. I drove my pickup truck down this gravel road. I went to the north end of this plot where no one would see it, right? And I took a little squirt bottle of Liberty and I sprayed some of the corn on the edges here just to confirm that it was Liberty. I came back 3 days later and that corn was dead, just deader than a doornail. And it told me that it wasn't a Liberty corn, but boy, if I would have sprayed that, I would have torched every pass of corn in this study. And I bring this up because if you're going to do a system like this, you're going to have to be a little more organized than what I was. Herbicide is going to be a big function of being successful with this program. Okay. Now, getting back to the yield here, if this is going to work, if we're going to go to the management of this, we got to pick up yield on these outside edges, right, to make it worthwhile. We're trying to get all this sunlight interception on the outside couple rows and just drive yield like crazy. Now, to interpret the data, and let me go back a couple slides. These strips are 40 foot because when I set up the management of this, I said, number one, herbicide, we're going to go Liberty on it. But I said, what about the rest of the agronomics? Side dressing this corn. I want to side dress corn. I'm still going to manage it the same way I manage the rest of my corn. I've got a 40-foot side dress applicator. So I said, let's put these in 16 rows, 16 row planter, 16 row side dress bar. I can come in, I can manage this thing. 8 row corn head on the combine. Okay, that's a full round down and back, and I've got these things harvested. 40-foot beans. I did have a 30-foot platform. I had to fight through that just a little bit. It didn't fit perfect, but yet it was manageable. I was able to do it. Okay. So to interpret the data, 16 row planter, the center here is actually the center of the planter. And again, these are north-south planted strips. And what you see is the outside wings. So the wings, the outside here, these would be the wings next to the soybeans. And we were picking up a 10 to 11% yield increase where the corn was next to the beans and did have access to more sunlight. How much yield increase? About a 25.5 bushel yield increase on the west outside rows. Now, I harvested these in 2 rows, 2-row increments to monitor the yield. Okay. 2, 4, 6, 8. 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay. 25.5 bushel yield increases of corn times 375. That's about a win of $100 an acre, $95.63 to be exact. Okay. So I thought, wow, this is actually working. We're actually picking up yield with this. This is great. The problem was this. What do you see wrong in this picture? Do soybeans like sunlight as well? Yeah, they do. And we're getting a shading effect in these north-south rows. Now, this picture was taken later in the afternoon where the sun's starting to go down a little bit. You see this corn causing shade on 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 rows of beans. In reality, this happens twice a day in the morning. Come on at 5 o'clock in the morning and watch the sun come up. These rows are going to be shaded over here because the sun's on the east side, not the west side here. So it happens twice a day, and this is causing yield loss. How much yield loss? Well, the data is actually inverted from corn. Our highest yields are coming in the center of the 40-foot strips, and we're losing 15 bushel to the acre on the wings. This would be the beans next to the corn that's being shaded. 15 bushel yield losses times the price of beans at $9.75. Congratulations, I lost $146 an acre. And if you remember what my gains were on the corn, remember the gains were pretty successful, 25.5 bushel win on the corn. That was $95 of a win. I gave up all my gains and then some with these soybeans. So we're going to reevaluate this. We're going to plant them north, south, and east, west in 2021 here. And then the other thing we're going to evaluate is the width. And, you know, I did this in 40-foot strips knowing that they were probably too wide. Okay. Now, I thought it worked out fine management-wise, though. I could get all my equipment to fit here. But there's been a lot of folks that do this strip cropping thing that have kind of made fun of me a little bit, and that's fine. I'm good with it. Saying I'm setting this thing up wrong. And they say, well, your strips are too wide. You need to narrow them up. And I said, well, okay, well, how narrow do you want these strips of corn and beans to be? And a lot of folks say either 4 rows or 6 rows. And I don't know how I'm going to manage it on a large number of acres. You know, 4 and 6 rows with a normal combine with duals on it, you put a 6-row corn head on it, and your tires are going to be running over corn. The width is actually, you know, the width of the combine is greater than the head. Some folks are saying, you know, you ought to plant short corn on the outside edges. And I understand that. That would cause less shading. The thing I had to document, though, first in these 40-foot strips, I had to document the difference between the center and the wings and know what that number is. And then we'll start attacking doing some of the narrower strips, the shorter corn on the outside edges, and seeing if we can come up with a solution to fix some of the problems. That's what we do at Precision Planting. I think we do hard things, but we've got to document what the losses are and then go in and try to fix it. So we're going to try to tell the whole story here from start to finish. All right. So I've got a couple other topics if we've got time to talk about, and I think we do. Before I get too in depth with it, though, if you guys do want more information about what we're talking about here today or some of the other stuff that we're working on, you can go to InsidePTI.com and you can get all the videos that we put together. I'm doing 2 videos a week right now, just talking about some of the plots and some of the data that we've collected here at the farm. Those come out on Tuesday and Thursdays. There'll be a new one that comes out tomorrow. So if you sign up at Inside PTI, you'll be able to get the one tomorrow and then all the ones that come in the future. But you'll see us out in the field typically with some of the stuff we're working on, and you go to your phone and you just type in your first name and your email address, and we just need to know who you are and who to send it to, and that's it. If you find you want to unsubscribe in the future, just hit the unsubscribe button. No hard feelings here. You can also go to our 2020 PTI Research Summary. All of our premier dealers at Precision Planting were sent this book. It's about 200 pages in size, all from the Pontiac location here. Over 100 and I think it ended up being 125 agronomy trials that were published in this particular book. So if you're interested, talk to your dealer, and they can get you this data if you're interested. I always give my information out: email, Twitter. If you guys are on Twitter and want to follow along, there's my J Webster Ag, but there's my phone number too. However, I'm giving this information out, but I want the disclaimer known: don't call me first. And I say that because I'm not your local guy. Okay, call the folks at Equity. Okay, they're going to be your local guys. If you have a question, you can feel free to reach out to me, but I just don't need to be the first one. You can send me an email or give me a call or reach out and watch on Twitter. That's totally fine. But I'm always a big believer in working with the folks that are local and developing that relationship. So that needs to happen. All right, let's get into the next topic real quick. Closing trials at the PTI farm. I've had a hard time figuring out how to use a closing system on a planter, and it's been a real struggle in the past. And guys, it shouldn't be that much of a struggle, because all I'm asking for is 2 things from a closing system. Number one, see this air pocket right here? You see that corn that we planted in the bottom of the V, we left an air pocket here. We didn't close it. We left the slot open. Okay. That's one of the things I'm asking for a closing system. Get rid of that air pocket. This seed, that white little thing you see on the corn seed right there, that's the embryo. There's only one of them on a corn kernel, and that's what imbibes water. That's what allows this corn kernel to germinate and ultimately get out of the ground, to emerge. It's not going to germ in this situation because the embryo is not attached to water. It will eventually get water, probably, if it rains. It will rain, go through the soil profile. It will collapse this air pocket, and now your embryo can imbibe the water, germ, and start to come up out of the ground. The problem with that, though, it's going to be a late emerger. And we all know, looking at this picture, that plant is going to be yield loss. And that is totally the closing system's fault. The closing system failed on us there. The other thing I want a closing system to do is blow the sidewalls out. We came in with openers of the planter and we created the V, if you will. These red lines, that's the V from your openers, and that's a soil density layer. That's compaction. That's size potentially. And if you're planting into wet conditions, this is going to happen out in the field. But this V, we want that closing system to blow that sidewall smear out of there and make it look like we were never, ever there. Oh, we're using different closing systems, trying to get both of these goals accomplished. Again, blowing the sidewalls out and getting rid of that air pocket. And so I know there's a ton of closing systems growers can use. There's a bunch. I'm using different systems as a way to analyze them based on how heavy they are, how light they are, and what kind of finger or dimple they have on them. And so this first wheel that I evaluate is a situation where a grower is using rubbers, these traditional rubber wheels, and then saying, okay, yeah, maybe they don't work the best. Let's put on a lightweight plastic spike wheel. And this is a Yetter Poly Twister, a very, very popular wheel throughout the countryside. But, looking at this, if you weigh a rubber wheel compared to this poly, this poly is going to weigh less. And now my question to you is, if you do this, where do you set this T-handle for your pressure back here? How do you know where to put it? I don't know how to set it, guys. I don't, because as soil conditions change, you need to be back here changing this thing. And so I don't know how to effectively do it. Okay. I do know this, a rubber wheel is not a very good closing system. It can't blow a sidewall out. It probably could push an air pocket out, but you're going to have this T-handle pretty aggressive to get it. Generally, we say if a planter shows up at PTI with these rubber wheels on it, we will not plant with it, because that closing system cannot do both things for us of blowing sidewalls out and pushing the air pocket out. So why even try? Okay. Now, the next scenario we evaluate is where we take the rubber wheels off completely and we put both of these lightweight plastic spikes on. Okay. Now you've got a very light system here. You need to be a little more aggressive with your T-handle, but look at these spikes on here. These spikes, how long are they? Okay, think about planting corn 2 inches in depth and trying to blow the sidewalls in the air pocket all the way down to the 2-inch level. Some of you are going to say, well, wait a minute, I can't get down to 2 inches because maybe that spike will start moving the seed a little bit. Yeah, it will. So they shorten these things up. The problem with it is you don't get the air pocket and the sidewall smear all the way down to the seed. That's a problem. Now we go to heavy wheels. These are a Martin-Till dual dimple. This wheel, if I remember right, with the bearing weighs 35 pounds. You put two of them on, you got a 70-pound tail. Now, where do you put this T-handle? I don't know. Here's a Yetter cast finger. Oh, now these fingers get a little bit longer. Now we worry about being too aggressive and repositioning seed in the trench by trying to be aggressive, getting in to blow that sidewall out, and hopefully we're not moving seed. But that is an issue with closing systems. All of these we're comparing to Furrow Force. This is a new closing system that Precision Planting came out with a year ago. This is a two-stage system. And remember how we asked a closing system? We just said we need to get rid of the air pocket and we need to get rid of the sidewalls. Go to work for us. A single stage system can't do both of those things. They can do one, but not both. So we created a system that is 2-stage. The first stage here is designed only for sidewall smear. Lift and fracture below those walls, that V out of there. And then the second stage system is to push the air pocket out. Okay? They only have one job. Go do your job, do it right. We know this guy's not going to do both. It's only lift and fracture. This guy's only air pocket. Okay? And to make this thing better, we've got a sensor on here that allows us to work very similar to our Delta Force downforce system. And so if you guys are familiar with downforce, we've got a pin here that basically measures weight on the row unit, so we can measure loss of ground contact of this row unit. So if this row unit starts coming up out of the ground, we can take this hydraulic cylinder, push down, and keep this planter row unit in the ground to achieve depth. It's the same way back here with our closing system now. If we start losing ground contact, these coming up out of the ground, we know we're not going to be able to close the slot, blow the sidewalls out here, and we're not going to be able to blow the air pocket out. We're using an airbag to push down to be more aggressive to keep that thing in the ground. If we're being too aggressive, we will take air out of the bag and we will lift up. But we're constantly sensing, constantly reacting and changing based on conditions on a square inch basis as we plant through the field. Guys, the best analogy I can describe is with your normal closing wheel systems, like this guy right here. If you have variability in the field, it's like somebody is walking behind your planter with their hands on this T handle, and they're adjusting the setting, changing the setting while you're planting. We are doing that automatically with this furrow force system. So it's a 2-stage closing system that automatically senses and changes, reacts in the field. So we put all of these closing systems on our planter and we went to the field. All the data I'm going to talk about today is conventional tillage. Okay, conventional tillage on the planter. Now, the thing I can't stand about closing systems is I can't see them. That's me in the tractor up here, guys. I'm planting away. Can I see my closing systems? Can you guys, when you're planting corn or soybeans, can you see your closing system working? No. You know, you can see row number 1 of this planter. You can tell it's a furrow force row unit on here, but you can't see any of the rows. If you have any dust flying at all, you can't see these things. And so I feel helpless here because I can't monitor these things to see how they're working, or at least I haven't in the past. Now I'm getting values in real time on the 2020, and I'm watching how this thing is reacting, how it's performing. If it's not performing right, I can make sure it does. This was a video I saw on Twitter. I don't know when it was recently here. And they were talking about, oh gosh, we're doing these closing wheel studies and it's working so good. And I saw this video and I said, what do you mean working so good? Anybody see any problems with the slot on this? I mean, we're not doing a good job of closing in this particular situation. This is the problem with a single stage closing system that's not aggressive enough to lift and fracture and blow that air pocket out. This thing's going to be wide open. We're going to dry out and that thing's going to be wide open. The T handle in the back, where do you set it? Okay, you got the different notch positions. I've struggled. How do I know where to put this thing, especially when conditions change while I'm planting? On your planter today, you guys tell me. Grab your phone again and tell me what system you're using on your planters. Okay, you know, you got the rubber wheel here. We've got consider this one here like a Yetter poly twister or a copperhead furrow cruiser. Here's the cast fingers. Here's cast smooth, or here's a case IH. What are you guys using? I'll give a little bit of time for some of the votes to come in. See what we end up with here. All across the board. While you guys are voting, I'll tell you a quick little story. I went down to Kentucky and we were doing a grower meeting there. And, you know, you get into Kentucky and you get some super tough soils, right? Super high clay content. And I showed them this picture and they said, we never use a rubber closing system like this because we know it can't lift and fracture, blow the sidewalls out, and push an air pocket out. They said in tough conditions, they know that thing's not going to work. And I thought that was just an interesting conversation. They've battled the problem, and now we got to attack this thing and go fix it. I do think it's interesting that 56% of the market here is going to the plastic wheels, like a Yetter Poly Twister or a Copperhead. I think that's probably a trend that is pretty widespread. If I didn't have a furrow force system available, I probably would go to this type of a system. So I think you guys are on the right track. Overall, the growers I've talked to doing these grower meetings, 44% are using the dual rubber system. Traditionally, this is the most popular closing system out across the countryside. And this system just does not work very well for us. It's a packer and a sealer. You take this T-handle, it won't work very well in that position, but you take this thing down and you be pretty aggressive with it, and you can pack and seal and try to conserve moisture in dry conditions with this thing. But that's all you're going to get out of this wheel. So for us to evaluate closing systems, we're out flag testing. We'll plant our corn. We'll give it about 100 heat units to just be about poking up through the soil surface, and we're right there waiting for it to flag it. We're flagging on a 12-hour interval, 12 hours, 24, 36, 48, and 48 hours plus. Okay. Now, all of us would agree that all our corn should come up at the same time. But if we're out flagging every 12 hours, we've got a different color flag at every 12-hour interval. If the corn's coming up all at the same time, we ought to have one flag color in our replications here in the field. And here's a block we've got out in the, at the PTI farm, and you can see all the different colors of flags. And that means corn's coming up at different times. Here's where I was in the field. I flagged this corn plant. It was up out of the ground. I flagged it. You can see the flag sticking in the ground here. I come back 12 hours, and I got this guy poking up out of the ground. And what I'm asking you today is there a yield difference there? That's a 12-hour difference in emergence. I got both of them up out of the ground, but there's a difference in going to be a difference in growth stage here, right? Is there yield detriment when this happens? Go back one. Yeah, what do you guys think on this question? How long does it take to get 100% emergence on your farm? I've asked this question a lot, and I guess there's a difference on what you want and what you're getting. But I left 12 hours out of this one completely. I just wanted to see what people would say on this question. But look at this. We're getting, some of you are saying 48 hours plus is what it's taken. And when I ask this question, this is not when I plant the seed and it's taken that many hours to get the seed up out of the ground. I'm not saying that. I'm saying once the first corn sticks its head up out of the ground, how long does it take to get the rest of them up out of the ground as well? That's the question here. And so I don't know how many people have ever flag tested before, but I'd be really curious. 38% of you guys say it's taken 36 hours to get corn up out of the ground. Going out and flag testing, you'll be able to find that out and then see the differences if you're not getting that. I wanted to see if this race to 12-hour thing is even happening. Can we get corn up out of the ground totally within 12 hours? That's what I wanted to find out this year. And what I'm going to show you is only 12-hour data in this data set. And to interpret this, I'm going to show you the same color graph for the next few slides here. And the blue bar will always be the two-stage automated furrow force. Okay? The gray will be the dual Yetter twister. The orange, the rubber, and a Yetter twister. This green, the light color green, is a rubber and a Yetter cast, and the darker green is a dual dimple. These wheels will always be positioned in the same order. It's just the numbers are going to change. Okay? Now, when we went out and we planted at 4 miles an hour out in the field, a slow speed, furrow force, the dual Yetter twister, and a rubber Yetter twister, all three of those systems did in fact get over 90% of the plants up in the first 12 hours. They did excellent. The other two, dual dimples and the rubber yetter cast, only had 80% of the plants achieve 12-hour emergence. In other words, 20% of those plants were classified as some kind of late emerger, either a 24-hour, a 36-hour, a 48-hour, or a 48 plus. But 20% were classified as late emergers. I'm guessing some of you plant faster than 4 mile an hour. Let's speed the tractor up and plant faster. Now we're at 6 mile an hour, and look what happens. We start to see a separation of the data. Furrow force, the blue bar, okay, on the right, over 90% of the plants up within the first 12 hours. All of the other closing systems never hit 80%. Some of them were close to 70. Let's go faster. We're at 8 mile an hour now. Now we've got some of these guys dropping into the 60 percentile range, but look at furrow force, still over 90% of the plants up within the first 12 hours. We've got speed tube. Let's go faster. Let's go to 10 mile an hour. Same thing. Furrow force at 90%. All the other systems have some late emergers. Now, this data that I've presented so far is corn that's planted 2 inches in depth. And as we look at higher speeds, a couple things can happen. Number one, downforce is super important as we plant faster. As you plant faster, the row unit wants to come up out of the ground. If you don't have the right downforce to keep it in, you're going to shallow up. So I said, just for fun, let's shallow up our planting depth from 2 inches to 1.5 inches and see what happens. Because remember, some of these wheels, closing wheels that we're using, have spikes on them. Okay, and so I said, let's shallow up. We left the settings on the closing wheels exactly the same. I just shallowed up to 1.5 inches. And guys, it was a train wreck. Some of these systems are in the 40 percentile range of getting plants up within the first 12 hours. Why is that happening? I shallowed up planting depth, and the thing we got to worry about here is, are we repositioning some seed? We're shortening up some of these spikes on a closing wheel so we don't get into the seed. But when we shallow up, whether it was improper downforce or you thinking there's a heavy rain coming tonight and you just shallow up anyway, if we're going to, bust through a sidewall, but we're going to move a seed, we've got a problem here. But the thing is, furrow force still over, it was almost 95% of the plants up within that first 12 hours. So even at high speeds, slow speeds, we're still getting the highest concentration of 12-hour emergers.
Hey, Jason, we've got a question that came through.
Sure.
So does everything but for furrow force have drag chains? And if not, do you think drag chains make a difference?
Yes, good question. So all of the closing systems other than furrow force are running drag chains. I do think with these spike type wheels, we do need a chain on the back to kind of drag a little bit and level. But I would recommend those, and they're super cheap to put on a planter. I would go ahead and put them on. Furrow force, you don't need them though. You don't need a drag chain going behind furrow force. Good question though. All right, so the race to 12 hours. Okay, now I'm getting it to happen in a high percentage in some wheels I'm not. Now, does it even matter? Okay, so I've got all the plants flagged from when they came up in different timing intervals. I said, let's just bag them up. We're going to bring them into the shop and we're going to weigh them. We weigh thousands and thousands of ears. Okay, we bring them into the shop and we put them through a sheller. This is our combine, if you will. It does a beautiful job of shelling corn for us, but we weigh it, we take moisture on it, and we know what the yield loss is of these late emerging plants. And guys, here's what we ended up with. Now, let's just talk occurrence factor. So again, I'm flagging plants, 12 hour, 24, 36, 48, and 48 plus. 77% of the plants in everything that we tested, speed, closing system, depth, everything, 77% of our plants did come up in the first 12 hours. And I'm going to say today, that's the best we can do, is 12-hour emergence. Okay, so now what's left over? The next 12. Okay, it took them an extra 12 hours to come up. That was 18% of the population. 36 was 2%, 48 was 1%, and 48 hours plus was 2%. That's the occurrence factor. Now, if 77% of the plants in this first 12 hours is my norm, I'm going to say there's no yield loss there. So now let's look at the late emergers and figure out what the yield loss is now that we know the occurrence values of them. Guys, here's what we found out. The next 12, the plants that took an extra 12 hours to come up, lost 12% yield. And I'm fascinated by that, because does that mean that a 12-hour delay in emergence meant 1% yield loss per hour? I don't know. We've never tested that before, but it's probably something we ought to take a look at. 12% yield loss for a 12-hour delay in emergence. Then it gets more severe. We go to 36 hours, we're losing 42%. We go to 48 hours, we're losing 78%. In a 48 hours plus, we didn't lose 100% of yield, but pretty darn close at 90. Here's what the years look like. And to interpret this data, the top shelf, what's in the red box, that's all the ears from the plants that came up in the first 12 hours. That's what I'm saying is the best. We can't do any better than that today. Now, we go to the next 12, to be the 24-hour emergers. That's that 12% yield loss, and you can see the ear size. We go to the next 12, that's 36. Now you start to see some pretty big differences in ear size. Go to 48, kind of see those ears, and then 48-hour plus, there's some barren ears here, severe yield loss when this happens. So now the question is, which one of these are costing me the most money? Which one is the most severe based on what we found in the field? And everybody always says, well, these guys here at 48 hours, they're the ones that have to be giving you the highest yield loss. That answer is incorrect. It is not right. The one that's costing us the most money is this guy right here, the next 12. And let's figure out why. Well, guys, we already talked about the occurrence values. If 12-hour emergence is our baseline, we can't do any better than that, then we simply look at what's left over. And the highest population of plants are the ones that took an extra 12 hours to come up. You know, in this 24-hour range, it was 18% of the population. You go to 36, 48, and 48 hours plus, look at how small of a population it is. Only 2%, 1%, 2%. Yes, when we had these guys here at 48 hours plus, it was severe loss, but fortunately, it's not happening very much. But this 18% is why this guy showed the highest loss per acre, because it's happening the majority of the time. And when we calculate this out, this is almost a $20 loss per acre. Here you can see the yield loss, all these closing systems at 24, 36, 48, and 48 plus. But the highest loss came at the 24-hour emergers, the guys that took an extra 12 hours to come up from our baseline. Guys, every closing system lost me money. Fertilizers lost 4 bushel to the acre. The rest of the closing systems lost me dollars or bushels per acre as well. To get the difference between them, you take the 4.1 bushel off of all these other closing wheels, and that's the true difference between these guys. But the highest losses came at the 24-hour emergence, the next 12. And there's that $18.84 loss. And that's a 375 corn. What if we were pricing corn for 2021 at 420, 430, 440, or even better? This number is going to get higher. And so my question to you folks today is, how do we get rid of this $20 loss? How can we get a closing system to help us pick up that other 12 hours? Okay. And our data would suggest that Fertilizers, on average, all of the speeds, all of the depths, 93% of the time, we did in fact get plants up in that first 12 hours. 93%. All the other closing systems never reached over 77%. And so what I'm saying is, if we can get a closing system that doesn't allow the late emergers from having an air pocket there, or having sidewall compaction that slows it down, can we eliminate this 12-hour deviance in emergence timing, whether it's to 24, 36, 48, or 48 plus? It looks to me that if we give every seed the same opportunity to come up at the same time, we're going to do a good job with this. And so the biggest value proposition with furrow force is that the thing is moving. Remember what I said before? It's like somebody's walking behind your planter, moving the T-handle for you, saying, in this soil, in this spot of the farm, this is the right setting. But yet we move 20, 30, 50, 100 feet, and we need to change that setting. We're either being too aggressive or we're being too gentle. And so we're changing, we're measuring. This whole thing with a planter today is about sensing. I don't know how many of you folks run the planter tractor at home, but when you run the planter, you're in that cab of the tractor, there's a lot going on. And I'll ask you, what data in real time are you getting on the screen of your monitor? Are you getting performance of what that closing system's doing for you? Today, we have this opportunity. We can monitor this and know if we're getting it wrong. And if we are, we can fix it so we don't have yield loss. Okay, I'm going to show you a video of how furrow force works, but I want to explain it for just a minute here. Look at the first stage. Now, again, this first stage is only to blow the V out, the sidewall compaction from the V that we're making with the openers. That's the only thing this guy's doing for us. And then the wheel in the back, this guy is going to push the air pocket out. Each of them have one job and one job only. We've got a sensor up above that's going to be able to monitor, is this thing coming up out of the ground? Are we losing ground contact? If we are, we can put air to the airbag and we can keep this thing in the ground. If we're being too aggressive, we can lift up. But again, measuring, changing, getting it right every single square inch of the farm. All right, I'm going to start the video. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Look how we're zippering that furrow, blowing the sidewalls out. Lift, fracture. And then in the back, the second stage, just pushing that air pocket out. Now, one thing too, I'm going to go back to this one right here. Look at the concave of this blade. See how she's coming back away from the furrow just a touch? That's how when we go high speed, you know, some people would say, well, you're pretty aggressive here. When you go high speed, you're going to move seed in the trench. No, remember, our data would say that we still had some of the highest 12-hour emergent scores at 10 mile an hour, even at 1.5 inches. The way this blade comes in, we're not going to risk moving that seed in the trench. That's one of the things I like about this. Okay. So it's not like we have a spike coming all the way straight down, risking, yes, getting through the sidewall, but repositioning a seed. We're not going to run into that. Some of the things we're working on is spacing these things out. Right now, we've got a 5-hole where we can put one in the front position and then one in the rear position to let just a little more material through here, like rocks, things like that. I would recommend, though, if you do have rocks on your farm, to put a rock guard on. We do have a rock guard that comes with this. I would highly recommend it. And I'm saying that from experience. My home farm has got a lot of rocks on it, even the smallest rocks, like baseball size. You get that in here and you're going to plug the system up. So I would highly encourage rock guards if you have rocks on your farm. Okay. But there's that zippering again, and then pushing the air pocket out in the back. Everybody's got his job, one job only. Let's go do it. And then in real time, we're going to be looking at it on the 2020. Now, one thing too, so I got to evaluate all these closing wheels in different tillage environments. That's how I look at the stress, how we set these things, how good of a job they're doing. And I'm going to shut the sound off here. But here's where we come in and we're looking at conventional tillage. Now, think about that black dirt behind that chisel plow right there, that disc gripper. How are we going to set a closing system once we knock it down with a finisher? Is that easier than a no-till? Probably yes, I would say. But here we're running, 13 inches deep, making that soil black, and we got to come in and get a planter on top of this after we work it down once. Those closing systems are going to work a little different than something like, let me go. Actually, here's yield response. I should show you that before I go to the next tillage. Here's furrow force here at 278. This is non-irrigated corn. You've got a 3.1 bushel loss, a 3.5 loss. The dual yetter twisters were close in conventional. They were a 0.8. I remember a lot of you guys were using this type of system on the planter. That's why I say if you're not going furrow force, I think this is a very good option. And then here's a negative 3.5. However, furrow force beat every single one of these in conventional till. Now let's go to strip till. I showed you this picture before. Now what do we do with a closing system? This is where the width of the strip comes in, how deep it is, how mellow it is. Where do we set the closing wheels here? How good of a job can they do? Here's the yield data here. A win across the board for furrow force. Here's 5 bushel of a loss, 4.5 bushel loss, 5.5 bushel loss, and a 2.3 bushel loss. So again, a win across the board for furrow force in strip till. Vertical till, I'm not a huge fan of vertical till, but I know a lot of guys are doing it. And so I know guys are going to have to set their closing wheels in after this vertical tillage. And so does this make a difference? We look at the yield data here. Dual Martins running 5 bushel less. Rubber Yetter Poly Twister, a 4 bushel loss. Dual Yetter Twisters are a 2 bushel loss. And here's that Rubber Yetter Cast running a 4.8 bushel loss, but another win across the board here by being able to change the conditions and being able to react. Now, here's the thing I really want you to look at, no-till. And this is going to change the game in my opinion. Remember I told you earlier at the start of the presentation that I went from conventional tillage and tried to do no-till and I failed at it. The problem with no-till is closing. You leave the slot open. It's so much tougher to close in no-till because of the reduced tillage. And so now you need a good closing system that can do a little bit of tillage for you to close the slot, lift and fracture the sidewalls, and push the air pocket out. And guys, what I'm telling you is, if you put furrow force on in a no-till situation, you have the ability to become a rock star. That's what it was like for me. I was not a good no-tiller. I was raised to do too much tillage, conventional tillage. But when I put furrow force on the planter, look at this. Rubber Yetter Cast Finger, a 15 bushel loss. Dual Yetter Twisters, a 10 bushel loss. Rubber Yetter Poly Twister, a 13 bushel loss. Dual Martin Dimple, off 7 bushel. Guys, the point is with this, you put furrow force on, being able to adjust and react and change in the field, it will do a great job in tough conditions. The easier it is to close, maybe you don't need a furrow force, but do you have that condition all the way through the field? You make furrow force work in those tough conditions and it will reward you. That's one of the biggest things I've learned from using this 2-stage automated system in the field. No-till, it is an absolute rock star. Overall, if we just look at furrow force advantage by tillage program, no-till is about 11.4 bushel win. Vertical till a 4, strip till about a 4 as well, conventional tillage 2.7. I show you this because look, I think it's easier conditions in conventional to close, and as we start getting into tougher conditions, you start seeing furrow force with a larger win rate. Okay. There's the dollars per acre in each of the systems. On average, we're over a $20 win on a per acre basis by using the 2-stage automated closing system. And again, there's some of the pictures I showed you earlier, just beautiful, beautiful conditions that we're seeing after we run the planter and doing a good job of closing. One of the interesting things that we run into with furrow force is how do we set this thing? And so we've got people at the PTI farm here, people I work with, interns and such, that we've got to look at this thing. And one of the best things I can tell you guys, what we've done here at this farm and even on my own farm is when you make a planter pass, go back to this row and just straddle it. Get on your hands and knees, straddle this row and stick your hand in this furrow. Stick your hand down in where the seed's planted. Don't get a pocket knife out. Don't do that. Just put your hand in it. Close your eyes and just feel it. Okay? Just feel it and tell me what you feel in here. If you can still feel the sidewalls, you know you're not getting all of that smear out of there. Okay? You just feel it. And basically what it should feel like is that there's no sidewalls at all, no air pocket, but it's like we were never there. You have a seed sitting in that soil and it looks like we were never ever there. And when you do this, when you go to find the seed where you've closed properly, it's tough to find the seed. It really is. It is more difficult to find it. There's a lot of, my dad's a good example. He's 70 some years old. He thought forever while he was planting corn that you get your pocket knife out and you find the V after you plant, and you can find where the seed's at to check if it was in moisture and at depth. The V should not be there, guys. It should not be there. Yes, if it's there, it makes it easier to find the seed, but it should be gone. It should not be there if you're doing a good job of closing. And I feel that we're getting this at the research farm, and looking at some of the reduced tillage that we're doing, this has made it a lot easier. It really has. I like the fact that while I'm planting, I can watch the 2020 and I can look at the performance of my closing system. I can look at margin just like I do with downforce. Okay. And I can watch it row by row. And if I run into a problem, it's watching. Remember what I talked about when we're planning? I can't see the closing system working. I now have eyes on the closing system via the 2020 monitor, watching that performance while it's engaged in the ground. Some folks will say, well, auto versus manual. So we can actually put furrow force on a planter in a manual system. Okay, it cheapens the system up, but you're going to have to figure out how to set it because it's all manual. I do think you guys who do this will learn how to set it faster than a guy in automated mode, but you won't be right as many of the times until you learn how to use it. So here's a study that we did where we just compared a light, standard, and a heavy setting. And again, furrow force is just like delta force, where you have three settings: light, standard, and heavy, that you can start with, and you can kind of tweak the system to get it where you want to run it. But I compared the same weight of the row unit. Okay, so in light, we're running 15 pounds. I put it in manual and automatic and ran them side by side. In manual, lost by 4 bushel every time. We go to standard. Now we up it to 35 pounds, and manual got beat by almost 5 bushel. We go to the heavy setting. Now we're up to 55 pounds, and it was closer here. It was too much across the board, but still manual lost by 1.9 bushel. My point is this: I think we're all going to want the automatic settings. If you want to go to manual, I think that's totally fine. I appreciate you doing it because I think you're going to learn how to use it faster. But I think ultimately, I just don't know that we can change fast enough manually, and we're going to lose some of these bushel amounts in the process. Here's 2019 data. This is 2 years ago, running light, standard, and heavy. Light was getting the job done for me. As I went heavier to standard, I lost 1.5 bushels. As I went to the heaviest setting, I lost 6.3 bushel. Those equated to losses of $5 to almost $19 an acre. So these can add up quickly if we don't have it set properly. In 2020, look at this. This is all the auto furrow force settings compared to going furrow force manual, losing $8 an acre. Okay, and here's my static closing wheels, losing $13 an acre. So going furrow force and going manual, you're still going to be better off than some of these static closing wheels. But ultimately, we're going to probably want to go auto to capture all of the yield potential that we could potentially gain. So that's the closing system we're running to. I know, guys, that this is a major change in the way we're running corn planters. I get it. I know it. We've lived it, but it's doing so much of a better job for us of, again, blowing those sidewalls out and pushing the air pocket out. I don't know how to get it done. If some of these other static wheels that are one stage, single stage, if they had a sensor on them where they could move up and down according to planting conditions, I think they'd be much better. But we don't have that. We got a T-handle back there attached to a spring, and that's variability right there, and then it's not giving us the ability to measure and react. So that's basically all of the data that I wanted to present today. If there's other questions, I sure would be, I'd be happy to answer any if there are any questions.
Any other questions? You can go ahead and put them in the chat if you'd like, or shoot a text over to Ryan.
And if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and then, we can email Jason if you do have something burning or you think of something after the session. But we could sure get those over to Jason. I'm sure he'd help us out to help answer some of those questions. Jason, can't thank you enough. Appreciate you taking the time. I know this is a commitment on your side. As always, great information, and appreciate you sharing with us today. So I guess everybody's probably chomping at the bit, including yourself, to get back out and enjoy the nice warm weather before it may be a little windy, but I guess we'll deal with that if we can have the nice temperatures. So
Yeah.
with that, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And with that, I guess we'll end the session, unless you have anything else, Jason.
No, that's about it. I guess, one thing, if you're thinking about furrow force or any of the other topics we talked about, come out and visit us at the PTI farm this summer. We run field days July, August, September. So every day we're running Monday through Friday during that time period. Come on out and I'll give you a planter that's got furrow force on it, and I'll let you plant with it. It's one of the beautiful things about the PTI farm. It's about the experience. I want you to look at some of the new technology, look at some of the new agronomics, and allow you to compare it to what you've got on your farm. And it's all free. I don't expect there to be any cost here. You need to see the technology that's available and see how it's different and see if it could be a good fit for you. But I'll have planters set up, and we'll give you the keys to these tractors and planters, and you go out and plant and you can see it for yourself.
Sounds good. Jason, thank you again. Hopefully everybody has a safe planting season, and hopefully we grow a large crop this year in 2021. So
Absolutely.
thank you, Jason. Until next time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.